I'm going to make a bold statement that you are about to experience a dramatic positive shift in your income within the next 90 days. And that's if you watch this video to the end, you complete the practical exercises and apply these concepts that you're about to learn into your own life. Because these concepts that we're about to go through are what was taught to me by my mentor, who's a guy doing over 10 million per year. And these concepts are what have allowed me personally to close millions of dollars in sales for other businesses, to then generating tens of thousands per week in my own business, as well as helping numerous clients generate tens of thousands per month in their own lives. Because this goes way deeper than just strategies, scripts, tactics. Like, yes, those things are important, but what we're about to go through here is a mental model. It's a way of thinking. And this is truly what moves the needle. This is the foundation. Because when you know how to think about things and perceive things in the right way, then everything else will take care of itself. Everything else will become easy and effortless for you, including making tens of thousands every single month. So I'm incredibly excited. Let's dive in. Okay, guys, welcome to the mental model that unlocks 20,000 per month in sales. If you are new here, then welcome, where on this channel, all we do is talk about making 20,000 per month and beyond in sales. If you are a returning viewer, you've watched some of my content in the past, I really appreciate your support. Time is our most valuable asset, and you have kindly given me your time. It's something that I do not take lightly, and I'm extremely grateful for. Now, with that being said, let's dive in. Outcome of this video is that you're going to understand a mental model to apply to your income, sales, business that's going to ultimately allow you to make over 20,000 a month and beyond. Now, by the way, this is the mental model that was taught to me by my mentor who makes over 10 million per year. Near enough 1 million every single month. It's not too bad of a wage. This mental model has also allowed me to close millions of dollars in high ticket sales, to consistently rise to the top of near every leaderboard and sales team I've ever been on, to create a thriving business that makes me tens of thousands per week, and most importantly, has helped numerous clients make tens of thousands per month. And by the way, among many other things outside of income, business, sales, this can also be applied to getting in better shape in the gym, towards your relationships and dating life. There's so many applications to this mental model. Like I mentioned earlier on, this really is the foundation. This is the needle mover. And what I call this mental model is constraints mapping. So we're about to dive into it in detail. We're going to go through the entire process, how it works. You're going to have a really clear understanding of everything. And I'm also going to leave you at the end with some practical exercises as well as a tracker spreadsheet, which will make more sense as we dive in. So, constraints mapping. It's important first that you know what is a constraint. Now, a constraint in simple terms can be defined as the biggest problem. You could also call it a bottleneck that's currently preventing you from going to the next level. Now, this is going to make more sense as we go. Now, this constraint, it could manifest in the form of a certain belief that you have, a belief that you have about yourself or about the world, about other people, money. It could be a certain behavior or habit that you have. It could be a certain skill gap. It could be a resource, for example, time or money. It could be a system or process in your life, in your business, in your sales career that's missing. Now, what's really important to know is that a constraint acts as a ceiling that you will never break past until that ceiling, that constraint is removed. Now, this is why, for example, two salespeople, two closers, they be putting in the same hours, right? Working equally as hard, but one makes 5,000 a month and the other makes 30,000 a month. Now, the key difference is, this is so important. The 5K per month closer is still operating with a constraint that they are likely unaware of. Now, this is so important to understand. And again, it's going to make more sense as we go through this video. So just stick with me here. But the thing is that everybody in life, you, me, we have a constraint that for the large part, we're not aware of. So for example, my own personal situation, like I said earlier, a business that's making tens of thousands per week, which sounds great, but why am I not making 100,000 per week, for example? It's because of a constraint that I have that I'm not even consciously aware of. Like, everybody has some kind of constraint. Like, they have this goal in mind, this vision for what they'd like to have in their life, but they also have a constraint, which is the biggest problem and reason that they are not at that goal or vision. And super importantly, they are not aware, they're not consciously aware of what this constraint is. Now, why this is so important to understand is because I want you to think of your income like a pipeline, okay? And I've got an image down below here which represents this, but think of your image like a pipeline, okay? Now, the water can only flow through the pipes at the narrowest part of the pipe. So, for example, we've got this pipe here. Let's imagine that something got lodged in this pipe, right? So you've got all this water flowing through, but then what happens is there's like a blockage, okay? There's something that's lodged in the pipe, and that stops the water from being able to carry on flowing. Now, what happens is, the second that this blockage, this constraint becomes released, what happens? Boom. Okay, the water starts flowing again. So you've got the pipes, the water's flowing, boom, it hits that something lodged in the pipe, which represents the constraint. The second that constraint lifts, boom, the water just starts flowing abundantly again. And again, the narrowest part of that pipe, that kind of lodge in the pipe, is your constraint. Okay, and just like the analogy, every time that you fix a constraint in your personal or professional life, the water representing your income starts flowing, okay, starts flowing more and more rapidly. Super, super important. And practically overnight as well. This happens quick. So if you identify a constraint and that constraint is released, boom, your results will skyrocket practically overnight. Now, also what's important to know is that your goal isn't necessarily always to do more. Like, a lot of people in life have this idea that in order to get to the next level, they just need to work harder. Well, that is not always the case. Especially like the higher levels that you go, the higher income levels, you realize more and more how much it is not about necessarily just working hard. Now, don't get me wrong, work ethic, output, that could be a constraint, but it's not always necessarily going to be that. Again, especially the higher income levels that you go, the more and more you realize it's actually not even about hard work. We've kind of been lied to, like, oh yeah, you know, becoming a millionaire, whatever it might be, like, it's all just about hard work. Well, it's not, because as the old saying goes, if it was all just about hard work, then the builder on the construction site would be a billionaire. But believe me, guys, I know a lot of successful, wealthy people, and many of you would be, if you don't know many like very wealthy, multi-millionaire type people in your life, then it might surprise you that when you do meet some of these people, they don't work that hard. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent, but what's really important to know is that it's so important to find and remove the one thing, the constraint that's currently blocking the pipe, that's currently slowing everything else down. And every time that you correctly identify your biggest constraint, remember, most people are not consciously aware of what their constraint is, which is the first problem. And the first step is to correctly identify your biggest constraint. Again, it's going to make more sense as we go through, especially when we go through practical exercises. But every time that you correctly identify your biggest constraint, the biggest problem, the biggest bottleneck that's lodged in the pipe and preventing you from getting to your goal, every time you correctly identify that constraint, then fix that constraint, boom, practically overnight, more and more income will start flowing into your life and you will unlock the next level of income. So I'm going to give you guys a practical and a personal example from my own life. Now, a few years ago, when I was towards the beginning of my high-ticket sales career, so at this point I was on Charlie Morgan's team. Charlie's a pretty well-known guy in the kind of high-ticket sales space. Many people want to work on his, want to close and sell for his business because it's a very good offer. Yeah, I was working on that team. But anyways, this is towards the beginning of my high-ticket sales career. Now, it got to a certain point where I just could not seem to break past like 8,000 to 12,000 a month, no matter what I did. Now, here's an important point. For a long time, I thought that it was because of my objection handling. So I thought, although I didn't consciously at this time know what a constraint was, I kind of unconsciously thought that the constraint was objection handling. So I thought, I just need to get better at objections. So naturally what happens is that manifests into my actions and behaviors. So what would happen is I would just non-stop just train and just drill more objections. I'd do more call reviews. I'd buy more, courses, coaching programs. And yet even still with that, I just couldn't seem to break past that kind of rough 10 to 12,000 a month range. So what happened was, one evening, it's getting to the end of my workday. I'm getting more and more frustrated about not being able to reach the next level in my income. So I sat down at my desk and I began to really analyze and really reflect. So I started looking through the back-end system, and I was looking through all like the different members of the closing team. I was looking at their stats when I realized something very important. I noticed that the top closer, a guy who was doing over 20,000 a month, which was my goal at the time, was actually converting pretty much near enough the same amount of calls as me. Okay, now even though him and I were closing roughly around about the same percentage of calls as each other, he was making about 5,000 to 8,000 a month more than me. So that's when light bulbs started to go off. Remember, I've identified the wrong constraint earlier on. I thought it was my objection handling, which is an important point to note. So, it ultimately gets to the point where, like, most people aren't consciously aware of what their constraint is. The ones that are, they don't have the right constraint. They think the constraint is not what it is, not the thing that's actually blocking them. So they're working on the wrong things. But anyways, light bulbs started to go off in my head. Okay, so this is where I started investigating. I started analyzing. Now, the first thing I noticed about this guy, the guy who was like top of the leaderboard, making the money that I want to make, which, by the way, little side note here, but the easiest way to get to the results that you want is mimic and copy as closely as possible somebody who does have your results. So, somebody who's making 20,000 a month, you want to, copy and mimic their thoughts, their behaviors, their actions, their systems, processes. If you can just emulate and mimic and copy as closely as possible what they do, even down to like how they think, you will just emulate similar results. Okay. Side note there. But anyway, so I'm at this point, I'm investigating, I'm analyzing. A light bulb's gone off in my head, and I've realized that I have likely been working on fixing the wrong constraint. I thought the constraint was objection handling. It wasn't. Me and this guy are converting roughly the same percentage of calls, so it can't necessarily be objection handling. Okay. Now so again, I'm investigating, I'm analyzing. The first thing that I noticed is that he was taking significantly more calls than me throughout the month. Okay, so naturally my first thought is, okay, well, I need to just open up my calendar. I need to take more calls, which is, was true. But then I noticed something else interesting. He was not just opening up his calendar any more than me. He had a significantly higher show rate than I did. Okay, so he has more. So he's not only opening up his calendar and allowing more people to book into his calendar. Of the people who do book into his calendar, more of them are showing up. And this is very, very important in closing sales. If a prospect doesn't show up to the meeting, then you can't close them, right? So very, very important. So he had a significantly higher show rate than I did. And that is when the real light bulb went off, as I identified the right constraint at this point. So even though him and I were converting roughly the same percentage of call bookings, he was making 5,000 to 8,000 a month more than me because he was able to take more calls than me, which stemmed from more availability and a much higher show rate. And then boom, I've now identified the right constraint. I've identified the correct constraint. So important. And again, this is a process, and this mental model is going to make more sense as we go through this. But this for now I want to emphasize the importance of identifying the right constraint, not just becoming aware that constraints exist and that constraints block your income, but knowing how important it is to identify the right constraint. Now, the constraint in this example was that my show rate was atrocious, right? So naturally, I don't necessarily know this at the time, this mental model, but I kind of unconsciously know what to do. I'm like, okay, I've identified the right constraint. Now I need to fix the right constraint. So I swiftly texted him. I asked if he was around for a quick chat, which luckily he was. And I asked him exactly how his show up rate was that high. I was like, what is it you're doing, brother? Like, teach me, tell me, I'll copy it exactly. It goes back to what we were saying earlier. To get the results that you want, copy somebody else who has the exact same results. So we're on a Zoom meeting at this point, and he tells me his exact process, shares his screen, shows me exactly what he does. To which then going forward, I copied and emulated his exact pre-call process. So from the time of a prospect booking to the time of them showing up to the call, there's a series of events that happen that we call a pre-call process. And I copied his pre-call process exactly. And guess what happened? My show up rate went through the roof. And because of that, my total calls taken throughout the month went through the roof. And therefore, ultimately, my commission checks very swiftly skyrocketed up to 20,000 a month. And then boom, constraint fixed. So do you see how that works? First off, identify the right constraint. Identify the biggest bottleneck, the biggest problem that is blocking you from reaching the next level. Remember, like that pipe analogy, you have a constraint that's blocking the water. It's lodged in the pipe. The second you fix that constraint and therefore remove the lodge, boom, and then the water starts flowing again. So can you see how identifying the right constraint is so important? Now, believe it or not, guys, fixing the constraint is actually often the easy part. Like, look there, like I spent months and months trying to work on the wrong constraint, and that's why I could never break my income ceiling, because I was working on fixing the wrong constraint. The second that I identified the right constraint, it was fixed within a matter of days. Fixing the constraint, again, is often the easy part. But what happens is I see so many people trying to fix a constraint which either, number one, just doesn't exist, or it has very minimal impact. Constraint is about fixing the highest leverage, the biggest thing that is blocking you from your goal, okay? So again, in the above example, I spent months thinking my constraint was objection handling, only to spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, and even money buying programs and things like that trying to fix that constraint, a constraint which didn't exist. I wasted months of time as well trying to fix an incorrect constraint, but the second that I identified the right constraint, boom, my results skyrocketed in literally a matter of days. And every single salesperson, every single business owner, anybody who's interested in income growth has to make it a habit to daily, or at the very least weekly, think about, reflect, and analyze on what your biggest constraint is. It has to become a mental habit to really just every single week sit down. And by the way, I'm going to give you guys a tracking sheet and walk through this in just a second. It's going to really help you guys in terms of making this a habit of thinking about your biggest constraints every single week. I'm going to give that to you at the end of this video. But really make it a habit to think about, reflect, and analyze on what is the single biggest constraint that is holding me back from X goal right now. What is the single biggest thing, constraint? What is that thing? What is that problem that is holding me back from getting to that goal? Because there often is just one thing. Literally, there often is just one thing. Now, as we're going to talk more about, like, yes, as we grow, okay, there are going to be new constraints that manifest. But getting to that initial goal, there often is just one thing that you need to do. There's one constraint that you need to correctly identify and fix, and boom, you will be at your goal, okay? So really make this a habit to, again, reflect on what your biggest constraint is. Again, write it down, and then go out to work on fixing it. Because remember, fixing it is the easy part. It's identifying the right constraint that can be more difficult, okay? So identify the right constraint, fix the right constraint, okay? Because truthfully, here's where it gets key. Income growth, you getting to your goals, your income goals in life, it is quite literally as simple as, number one, picking an income goal. So for example, 20,000 a month, identifying the biggest constraint. In other words, what is the single thing that is stopping me from achieving that goal? Thirdly, fixing that constraint. And then boom, repeat over and over. So practical example, right? So let's say your income goal is 20,000 a month. I've done step one. I've now picked my income goal. Now you need to identify the biggest constraint. Okay, what's the biggest constraint that's stopping me from getting to 20,000 a month? Well, let's say hypothetically that you're in some kind of, I don't know, corporate sales job where you have capped commission, you have a base salary, and it's pretty much impossible for you to go beyond 10K a month, for example, okay? Okay, boom. Now I've identified the biggest constraint. I'm in the wrong opportunity vehicle. In this current sales job that I am in, it's not possible to hit 20,000 a month because my commission structure doesn't allow for it. Okay, now I've identified the right constraint. So now I'm going to fix that constraint. I'm going to sign up at Scott's training and recruitment program and get me into a solid remote sales role with uncapped commission, with so much potential to make 20, 30,000 a month and upwards. Okay, boom, now I've fixed that constraint. Now I've signed up with Scott. I'm placed into a role. I've had the training. I'm now closing deals. Okay. But now my constraint is actually, I'm now into a role, but I'm not getting as many people showing up to the call as I need in order to hit 20K a month. Okay, boom. I go to Scott. Hey, Scott, my sharp rate is bad. It needs to be fixed. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Here you go. Fix it like that. Copy this process. Boom. Constraint released. And then boom, I'm at 20,000 a month. Do you see how that works? Pick a goal, identify the biggest constraint blocking you from getting to that goal, fix that constraint. Now, boom, you're at 20,000 a month. Remember, the water's flowing in that pipe analogy. Now, actually, do you know what? I want to be at 40,000 a month. Okay, well, this current closing role that I'm in, with how many calls I take, etc., it's difficult to go beyond 30,000 a month. Okay, boom. Now my constraint is that I need a new vehicle. Okay, well, actually, I've built up so much skills, so much connections, so much cash reserves from working with Scott, of course, that now I'm going to go off and start my own business, okay? So now, rather than selling for other businesses and taking their Zoom calls, now I'm going to drive people to my own Zoom calls and sell my own products and service. Okay, but the constraint, I can't get any call bookings. Okay, boom. Now I need to figure out how to drive cold traffic to a Zoom call. Scott, where are you? I come in, I help you. Okay, boom, here's how we're going to do it. We set up these ads, blah, 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 blah. Okay, boom, now I've got call bookings. Now I'm at 40,000 a month, but actually I want to get to 100,000 a month. Okay, what's the constraint? I need a team. I need a team of people. I can't do this all by myself. Boom, we hire a team. See how that works. Pick a goal, identify the biggest constraint, fix that constraint, repeat over and over and over for life, okay? So now we're going to get into some practical exercises, guys, super important. So I want you to ask yourself, ideally write it down, but at least ask yourself, firstly, what is the real reason I'm not already at 20K a month? Or, insert whatever goal you have. If you might already be at 20K a month and you want to get to 40K a month, put that in there. Maybe 20,000 a month is a bit like, you can't fathom it. It's not like in your perception yet. Maybe you just want to get to 10K a month. Fine. Replace that number with whatever feels a stretch for you, but you could see yourself doing it, okay? So what's the real reason I'm not already at X per month? Then secondly, ask yourself, and ideally write it down, but at least ask yourself mentally, what is the one thing that if I fixed would make everything else either easy or just frankly unnecessary, okay? Remember my example earlier on. I was trying to fix the constraint of objection handling when actually it was unnecessary. It wasn't even a problem. It wasn't a constraint at all. My constraint was show up rate, okay? My constraint was being able to take more calls. Third and finally, ask yourself, and ideally write down, if a mentor followed you around all day, so let's say pick somebody online that maybe you really respect, they've got the kind of results that you want in life, okay? If they followed you around all day, do this mental exercise, visualize it in your mind, in your imagination. If they followed you around all day, be honest with yourself, what do you think that they would say is holding you back, okay? Now write that stuff down, write the answers to those questions down. Maybe, for example, it's a lack of belief in yourself, a lack of confidence. Okay, well, that's a self-image issue. By the way, in the training program, I go, those guys that know me now, I'll go very deep on psychology. I love it. And I'm a big believer in ultimately knowing and understanding human psychology at a deep level. So understanding your own psyche on the deep level, but then also understanding other people's psyches on a deep level. As the old Bruce Lee quote, to know yourself, know others. So when you know your own psychology very well, you're going to naturally know very deeply other people's psychology. Human beings are not all that different, to be honest. Maybe it's a lack of knowledge or skills. Okay, well, I don't know how to close high-ticket deals. Maybe, again, goes back to earlier, maybe you're in some kind of job where you can't make beyond $5,000-10,000 a month. It's just not possible. You're on a salary, okay? Okay, boom, now that's the constraint. Now I'm going to work on fixing that. I'm going to book a call with Scott through the link in the description. Possibly, who knows? And this is your new focus. Remember, not 10 things. It's most often just one thing, one constraint that you need to fix and release, and then the water in the pipes will start flowing, and that will be released. And then, yes, a new constraint will manifest, and then we work on that one at a time. But it's not like all these 10 different things that you need to do. There's often just one high-leverage thing that you need to fix in order to get to your income goal. So then what's going to happen is, now, once you've identified that one thing, we're going to conquer that constraint. We're going to fix it. It's going to boom. The water's going to flow, and we're going to unlock a new level of income for you. And then we're going to pick a higher goal. We're going to fix the constraint stopping us from getting there. And then boom, once we fix that constraint, get to that new goal, we're going to repeat the process again. Pick a higher goal. What's the biggest constraint? What's the biggest thing blocking me from getting to that goal? Fix it. Boom. Go again. Repeat forever and ever. It's such a fun game, guys. It really is. Now, importantly, like I mentioned earlier on, tracking is so important. I promise you guys, this is not for my benefit, it's for yours. What gets tracked gets improved. And I cannot recommend enough just to keep track of and write down your constraints on a weekly basis. Ask yourself these questions on a weekly basis and write it down. Write down what your biggest constraint is. And luckily I've made it easy for you, right? I've already got a template which you can just copy, right? So just comment the word tracker down below and I'll send it over to you. So comment down below tracker or DM me on Instagram. It's Scott Parsons Sales. And yeah, I'll get that over to you. Okay. So nice and simply. So you'll just open that up. Obviously you make your own copy. Yeah. Step 1, pick a goal, for example, 20,000 a month. Step 2, figure out specifically what the constraint is that needs to be fixed in order to get that goal. Step 3, execute on fixing the constraint. And that's it. So just write down every single week, for example, 5th December, 12th December. Constraint, my job only allows me to get to 5K per month. Then the fix, I'm going, as we'll put on the notes here, going to apply for more for X roles, X high ticket sales roles, AI sales roles, like what we do or whatever it might be. But that's it, guys. Literally, pick a goal, identify the biggest thing and constraint that is blocking you from getting to that goal, fix that constraint, repeat the process. This is something that you can just take with you through all areas of life. Like I said, it's not just about income, business, and sales. This could be the gym, for example. Okay, so my goal is to get to 80 kilos, for example. Okay, now what's the biggest constraint? What's the biggest thing stopping me from getting to that goal? Okay, you have a real good think, you really analyze. Okay, well, I'm eating not enough calories per day. Boom. What do? I go out and execute on fixing that constraint. I sign up with a meal prep company, whatever it might be. Do you see the point? It doesn't just apply. This is a mental model that you can take with you throughout life. Anytime that you want something, just think to yourself, analyze, reflect, and write down what is the thing that is stopping me from getting there, execute on fixing it, go again. Okay, it really is that simple. So thank you so much, guys, for watching. I will see you in the next video. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you guys do want my help in getting to 10, 20, 30,000 a month and beyond by remotely selling for AI businesses, the greatest industry in the world right now, then click the link in the description, watch the video on that next page, then schedule a call with our team. We'll run you through exactly how we get you trained, how we get you placed, and how we get you to 10 to 30,000 a month and beyond. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I will see you on the other side.